Alrighty, the president of Sri Lanka has fled because protesters have stormed his house. This has just happened, so I thought it would be a good time to finish this video I was working on and upload it. And the video I was working on was me commenting on Koshi from Sunrise commenting on what's happening in Sri Lanka. So let's go into that clip.
Australia's Home Affairs Minister has travelled to Sri Lanka after hundreds of asylum seekers have been turned back in recent weeks. The country is struggling with its worst economic crisis in 70 years, leading to shortages of food, medicine and fuel and prompting fears of growing social unrest. Joining me now, Sunrise Foreign Editor Dr Keith Suter. Keith, what's going on in Sri Lanka? This has crept up on us. So I had no idea it was this bad.
Well, it's generally a good tourist attraction, but of course they've had COVID, so they've lost the tourist industry. You've got a crisis in Ukraine, which is flowing through in terms of food and oil crisis and all the rest of it. So, and you've also had a lousy government. Right. And they've followed the wrong economic advice. It's corrupt. And so, in a sense, it's all come together. The phrase is, it's a perfect storm.
OK. So people smugglers are telling asylum seekers, change of government, doors are opening.
It's probably pretty easy to spot what I want to discuss because it was the last thing he said before I cut it. People smugglers are saying to them, new government, doors are open. Keep in mind, our election was in May. This video came out in June and we're still only just in July. Now there's multiple reasons why this shit annoys the fuck out of me. First of all, why would our government have anything to do with these people's decisions? I'm pretty sure what's going on with their government would be the main driving factor for someone to decide to try and leave. And the other point on why this is so stupid, he starts off by saying hundreds of people have been turned back. So even with Labour and government, they're still turning them back. What difference would it have been? Such a stupid comment. Now, just to get a better idea of what's happening in Sri Lanka, I've got a few more clips I'd like to show you.
The country has run out of money and the economy is in free fall. There are shortages of food, fuel, and medicine. The currency has crashed, and prices for everything are sky high.
And
a lot of Sri Lankans blame the government and President Gotabaya Rajapaksa. There have been weeks of protests across the country. The Prime Minister, Mahinda Rajapaksa, who's the president's brother, has quit, and things have gotten pretty violent.
Sri Lanka's economic crisis is measured in endless queues. Musical queues to fill gas canisters, or turn the empty ones into roadblocks when they wait in vain.
There is no food. At least 500,000 Sri Lankans have fallen into poverty in the last few months. There is no fuel. There are no medicines. Critical surgeries are being cancelled. Doctors say the economic crisis may kill more Lankans than COVID did. There are daily power blackouts and wide-scale protests on the streets. What's happening in Sri Lanka is much more than an economic crisis. It is a humanitarian crisis.
So as you can see, it's pretty bad. The situation is really bad for a lot of people. And I'd like to point out that other countries were reporting about what was happening in April, May, around the time that Australia was having its federal election. So you might have snuck up on Koshi, but they had rice shortages back in 2021. And this clip of Koshi talking was uploaded on the 21st of June. And I've got more of that clip I want to show you.
Turning back the boats in line with our international obligations?
Well, international lawyers will say no, because people have a right to apply for asylum.
Even economic?
Yeah, well, this is the problem, because they're not really refugees, right?
Yes.
They don't have a well-founded fear of persecution on the grounds of race or religion. Some of them did, remember, back in the old days of the Civil War.
With the Tamils?
This lot now are economic refugees and they're not recognised under international law.
Okay.
I just want to take a second to really soak in what the screen says. Australia's cruel policy. Boat turnbacks condemned under international law.
We're promising $50 million to help out. How far will that go in sorting it out?
It's a drop in the bucket.
Right.
And this is on the verge of becoming a failed state. You can expect more people to try to get out of the country. It's a dangerous trip to come to Australia. It's 3 weeks on the high seas.
Yep.
And that's where I'll stop it to discuss the whole turning back the boats thing, because that's a piece of information I want to work off of. 3 weeks to get here. So at what point in that journey are we supposedly turning these boats back? I would imagine that Australia's border force doesn't go too far off our coast. And so let's step back and really take in the absurdity of this Sunrise segment. Koshi says people smugglers are out there saying Labor's in power now, doors are open just for us to continue to turn the boats back, which is condemned under international law. So Labor's open border policy is turning the boats back. Alright, and we're also meant to believe that people would only try and come here based on our government, not because of the crisis that they're trying to flee. Because if the Liberals were still in charge, that wouldn't have prevented the crisis in Sri Lanka from happening. Alright, now hear me out, Australia. Turn back the boats and stop the boats are the same thing. Because how would you stop the boat from leaving? You could only stop it from arriving by turning them back. And speaking of, your government's policies have very little to do with if someone tries to flee their country. That's more to do with a crisis that they're trying to flee. But even still, if you have a change of government but they keep the same policies, you're still going to have someone out there saying, yep, this new government with their new policies. Where here's a tweet from Greg Abbott, the governor of Texas. At least 42, I believe it's now higher, like 53, people found dead inside a truck carrying migrants in Texas. These deaths are on Biden. They are the result of his deadly open border policies. They show the deadly consequences of his refusal to enforce the law. Now, Greg, if it was an open border, why would they need to come across in the back of a truck? And so, yeah, I just want to point out that, like the Democrats in the USA, Labor here in Australia also have people say that they've got an open border policy, but in reality, it doesn't seem any different to the previous government. All they've really got is they're not marketed as cruel. But yeah, just like if you were trying to come to Australia in a boat or to the United States in the back of a truck, that decision isn't going to be based on what party's in power of the country they're trying to get into. It's probably because there's a crisis that they're trying to flee.